President Bola Tinubu last Thursday directed the immediate release of 102,000 metric tons of rice, maize, millet, and gari, cassava, from government reserves and stores of the rice millers to the Nigerian market. This was the high point of the three-day-long meeting of the Special Presidential Committee on Emergency Food Intervention, headed by Chief of Staff to the President, Femi Gbajabiamila. This is seen as a move to address the lingering issue of high cost of food items in the country. Minister of Information and National Orientation, Mohammed Idris, said that while the Federal Ministry of Agriculture and Food Security will make available 42,000 metric tons of maize, millet, gari, and other commodities, the rice millers, through the Umbrella Association, will release 62,000 metric tons of rice from their reserves. I'm now being joined for a quick chat on that subject matter by Kenneth Ahaneku, who is Group Managing Director and Chief Executive of Neon Holdings. He is also Chairman, Nigerian Silos Concessionaires Association. Thank you very much for joining us on This Day Live, the Sunday talk show, Mr. Ahaneku. You're welcome.
Thank you very much, Dr. Abati. And good evening, Nigerians.
Good. Thank you. As a policy initiative, what do you think of the plan by the Nigerian government, now a directive, to release 102,000 metric tons of grains to address the crisis of food inflation that has led to protests in many parts of Nigeria in the past few weeks? And then the appeal to commodity traders like your good self to support government and also make these grains available. As a policy initiative, is it practicable? Will it make any impact? Considering the fact that this is not the first time the federal government of Nigeria will say we're releasing grains. After all, under the Buhari administration, 40,000 worth of grains were purportedly released to address COVID. But we know what ended to that palliative at that time. But you are, in that business. What do you think of the initiative?
Okay, thank you once again, Ruben, for having me on board. You remember July 2023, yes, I was here to speak on this same subject at the time when government made its declaration on emergency food declaration, bringing the issue of food security under the gamut of the national security architecture. So the question is, what has happened since then? And what has led to government now saying they're releasing about 102,000 metric tons of grains to assuage or to minimize the impact of food prices increase in the markets? Okay, now, we've witnessed a series of discussion on this subject. The question is, does government have the grains that they say they are releasing? Some doubts have been expressed as to whether they have it or not. Before I talk about whether they have it or not, it's important for us to talk about where these grains would have been kept, if at all they have it. Like you rightly pointed out in your introductory remarks, Chairman Nigerian Silo Concessionaires Association. We're a group of about 7 companies with storage capacity silos scattered around the country. We have about 17 silos scattered around the country, and we have a total storage capacity of about 700,000 metric tons. That is private sector controlled. Yes, it is true. Government does have its own silos. So most likely, for those of them that are expressing doubt as to whether or not government does have those grains, yes, it is possible that they have those grains in their own silos. So government has its own storage. But whether those grains are available or not, I do not know. Okay, so now government has given a directive that, look, they are going to release grains into the markets. You just mentioned that they will release about 42,000 metric tons of maize. So what kind of impact would this make? So let's do some number crunching here. 42,000 metric tons of maize will come to, at about 500,000 naira per metric ton, will come to approximately 200 billion naira, if I'm not mistaken. That means government is releasing about 200 billion naira worth of maize into the market. You just asked Joajeru now, say, look, what impact will this make? So the question is government going to dash this amount of grains to people or what? Or are they going to sell it? Well, I will expect that government should sit back and avoid the mistakes of the past. Government has made mistakes in the past. Last year, they voted about 3 billion naira per state, if I'm not mistaken, yes? 3 billion naira per state for palliatives. They distributed 3 billion naira per state, and then each of those states were meant to buy foodstuff, rice, maize. What happened? They spent that money, pushed that money into the markets to buy rice that were already in the markets. What happened? Prices of commodities went up. In fact, in some states, they give out contracts for people to go and purchase rice and coal they could not find to buy. So the impact of that palliative program was just simply to lead to increase in prices. Now, if truly government is releasing about 200 billion naira worth of maize into the market, ordinarily, we should see that this should have some kind of downward effect in terms of the prices of maize. So we'll now see whether that happened at the end of the day. That will enable us to know whether it is true or not. But, Dr. Abati, we need to address a very important issue on this food security, on food prices, on a sustainable basis. And that is the kind of discussion I would like us to have, so that we have a fruitful discussion.
Okay.
Now, remember...
Go ahead.
Do you permit I continue?
Go ahead.
Yes. Remember when government came up with their own emergency food declaration, I think 2-3 weeks later, I granted an interview on your platform here. 2 weeks or thereabout later, the president himself addressed the nation. Let me just point a few highlights from that address. Number one, he selected 4 commodities. 1, maize. 2, rice. 3, wheat. 4, cassava. Remember that his selection of these 4 commodities was his own response to what I did say in my interview, where I said, look, government should just select 4 commodities. In that case, I did suggest rice, maize, soybeans, and wheat. But in the wisdom of government or the president, he selected rice, maize, wheat, and cassava. Fine. Secondly, he said, for each of these commodities, government will make available 50 billion naira for farming of these commodities. And they said they will make provision for land, about 500,000 hectares. Then they will establish commodities exchange. The question is, what has happened from that time till this moment? That's the question.
Okay, let me ask you.
What has happened?
Do we even have enough food to feed Nigerians? Because one of the lines that government has thrown up is to say that the problem is the pricing. It's not food availability, that food is available. Do we even cultivate, to cite one example, enough rice to feed a population of over 200 million people? So when they say the food is available, what exactly do those who push that argument mean? If you can't afford the food, how is it available? With a bag of rice now at 75,000 naira per bag.
The NLC president just gave an instance of price of rice now selling for between 60 to 70,000 naira per bag. We started from about 35,000 naira sometime last year. Now we're hovering around 70,000 naira per bag. To that extent, if the prices are so exorbitant beyond the reach of the common man, then you cannot say it's available. No. But So to answer your question, we cannot really say we are producing enough. Given the situation that, look, we're getting reports that if care is not taken in 2024, we'll have to import about 2.4 million metric tons of rice to augment the local production that will meet the more than 7 million metric tons of rice consumed annually by the Nigerian population. So the question is, why are we going back to do importation when under the Emefiele regime there was CBN intervention that supported local farmers to produce rice? At a point we're even saying that it looks like we were getting to produce some sort of enough to meet local consumption. So how come we are now going to talk about import of rice? That is why I would like to talk about how do we deal with the issue of local rice production so that we can avoid this issue. Dr. Abat, if you allow me a few minutes. Now, what I think is that statement that the president made, we should really go back and get that statement implemented. Now, how do I think it can be done? Number one, he said he has selected 4 commodities. So let us see how we can talk about the local production of, say, maize and rice. Now, I think government should look at locations where we have large cluster of land. Large cluster of land in the region of, say, 10,000 hectares, 20,000 hectares. We can even have a single location where we have 30,000 hectares of land. Okay. Then you support these locations with adequate security coverage. With adequate security coverage. That's number 2. Then you identify the farmers that are located in these large clusters. Once these farmers are identified and these farmers meet certain criteria, you can then support them with that 50 billion naira finance for maize. Let me give one example. In Bobi, Niger State, it's one example. There is 30,000 hectares of land inside Bobi Grazing Reserve. 30,000. A very fertile place for cultivation of maize. So that land is divided into about 4 among 4 companies. Some 4,000 hectares, 5,000 hectares, 10,000 hectares, but clustered in one location. So government can support the companies in that location for mechanized farming of maize. And then you support with security to cover the entire 30,000 hectares. This is no more time to talk about smallholder farmers, and then anchor borrower scheme. No, we should be talking about anchor farmer scheme for large-scale maize cultivation.
Okay, let me ask you.
In that same location, sorry, I need to add this point. Once the harvest, once they are secure, they are supported with security and the harvest is produced, they can then store that maize in Mina silo. So you have a location that has a large cluster of land. You have the companies that can do large-scale mechanized farming. You have companies that have the skill to farm, and you bring in the security. Once they harvest, you bring the storage to Mina. That's one example.
Okay, I hope you are aware that the governor of Niger State, we have very limited time. You are citing the example of Niger State. I hope you are aware that the governor of Niger State has said, in the face of this food crisis, nobody should come from other parts of Nigeria to come and cut away lorry loads of food items from Niger State, because the priority is to feed the people of Niger State first. But I was going to ask you, how do you address the challenge of middlemen and smugglers? Because, some other experts in the field say part of the problem is that food produced in Nigeria, even when it is not enough, is smuggled to as far as Central Africa, North Africa, and yet we cannot feed here. And the smugglers are the ones responsible for The hike in food prices, beyond all the points about naira devaluation and, macroeconomic issues.
Look, Dr. Abati, forget about this talk about how do you address the role of middlemen and smugglers. Let us focus on large-scale production of food, so that even if in the middle of large-scale production, the middlemen and smugglers are smuggling out of the country to Central African Republic, it will become income to farmers. Remember, the president, before the election, said, look, that when he becomes president, he will support the production of agbado, that will be farmers who make money, and then all that. Remember, let us now have that production. Let's produce it. That's what we are saying. Like, I give an example about, I gave one example for the North. Let me talk about the South. In Cross River State, we have a single location between the Ogoja and the Yala axis, where we have so much land, about 10,000 hectares of land. That place is very much fertile for rice cultivation. So government can again support the farmers there with finance, bring in the security, and then when the harvest is done, it is then stored in the silo in Uyo. And that is the point we need to address on a sustainable basis, so that with what we are suggesting, with adequate food production, once the food is produced and then produced and placed in the silo, the commodities exchange take over from that point. Once the food is paid for, once in the silo, they pay for it, the farmers can then go back to farm for the second cycle. On that note, with that strategy, we can begin to produce quite enough, and on an increasing basis, sustainable basis, large-scale production of food, maize, rice, wheat, soybean, and then we'll begin to take care of these challenges that we are facing with food security, with food shortage, with food prices as we are facing now, Abati. Let us implement what the president said. Let him go back to that his statement. 50 billion naira for maize, 50 billion naira rice, wheat, cassava. Then establish the commodities exchange. With the commodities exchange, we can begin to address issue of price moderation, which will enable government to now comply with the court order as from that was obtained by Falana. This is a court thing that he went for, to say, look, price of food should be fixed. No, price of food can be moderated by using the instrument of the commodities exchange. I get your point, but we've been talking about grains, and you had the NLC president saying, why grains, as if they are throwing maize and corn at Nigerians. How about dairy? Is there something that can be done in that regard? Livestock, dairy. You and I know that, yes. Okay, now that you have brought up the issue of dairy, yes. Okay, you remember we were part of the initiative by the CBN in 2019 to encourage, support, facilitate increased amount of dairy production. That initiative, through the instrumentality of the CBN, brought about 4 companies together. Well, we were part of it in 2019, and then we all went to Bobi, and then commenced the local backward integration for dairy production. But unfortunately, the banditry invasion led to we losing a huge sum of money. All the companies that were involved, we lost so much. The Niger State government has done a comprehensive report on that matter and submitted to CBN. CBN is looking into it. Apart from that, so we are hoping that with this the current leadership of the CBN, they will come back to address that issue, and some of us will then go back to continue with that initiative. Yes, Nigeria spends about $2.1 billion importing milk and milk-related products, and that is why the former CBN governor says, no, we can't be supporting dairy importation with scarce FX, which is why he said, look, let us encourage local dairy producers to increase the amount of dairy in the market for local consumption. So hopefully, with this current leadership of the CBN, we'll go back to those issues and begin to look at issues that we faced that hampered the takeoff of that initiative. Call us back, so that we can look at how we can increase dairy production in the country.
Okay.
There's something happened.
I want to wrap up now.
If you remember, okay.
Yeah, but go ahead, if you can make it brief, in less than a minute.
Yes, because of what we did, given the impact of what we did in Bobi, I think the Niger State government nominated some of us, including myself, to the Presidential Committee on Farmers Headers Clashes. Because what we did in Bobi, we were able to show that we can bring the farmers and the headers together in a harmonious system to encourage local dairy production. So these are some of the factors, some of the issues that government can consider so that these issues can be resolved amicably and we encourage local production of food, whether it is grains, rice, maize, soybean, sorghum, wheat, or even dairy products as the case may be.
Okay, well, on that note, we need to wrap this up. But today, the Super Eagles have a special date with history. I don't know whether you watch football, but even if you don't love football, football is what all of us have been talking about. Any predictions? Super Eagles versus the Elephants of Cote d'Ivoire.
Well, I think I would just predict that most likely the match will end 1-0 in favor of the Super Eagles. And they've been very, very superlative in their performance at the defense and then scoring just one. So let's see, it may just turn out to be that same way. 1-0 in favor of the Super Eagles.
I hope the technical team and Pesero will work out the problem we have in the midfield and make that midfield stronger so that it can complement the
we've
defense.
Whether midfield or not, they have been very solid at the defense. That's one. And in their attack, they've been scoring minimal goals. So I don't see much changing in this final. So most likely 1-0 favor of Super Eagles.
Okay.
That's what I think.
Fingers crossed.
Let's not do much analysis. Yes.
Fingers crossed. Thank you very much, Kenneth Ahaneku, MD CEO, Neon Holdings, and Chairman, Nigerian Silos Concessionaires Association. Thank you for joining us.